And now Martin Kjellin will talk about CLI Developer Tools.
Right, hi all, thanks for joining. I think I got a great pitch from Henrik Nudell in Hexedian this morning with all the applause for the CLI tomb, for the CLI screenshot, so I expected this to be even more crowded. Given the interest in CLI screenshots, which you're going to see a few. This will not be a live demo because of all the switching between windows, so I will talk you through it. All right, can you hear me better now? Thanks. Okay, I was just making a brief introduction. You didn't miss anything super interesting. Thank you for being here or for pointing out that you can't hear me. So what I'm going to talk a little bit about today is sort of a collection of utilities in the CLI and around it that I have found useful, and that when I speak to customers or NSO users within Cisco, that really kind of helps them get their NSO development flow going by using the NSO CLI. So this is not about running CLI in a live system for provisioning or troubleshooting or anything. This is about running it locally, more or less, is where I recommend these things. I should probably introduce myself. I am Martin Kjellin. I'm working as a technical leader within NSO engineering here in Stockholm. And CLI is not my area of expertise, so I might defer your questions to our gentleman over there. We have the CLI team. So we do have the expertise in the room. I am, however, decent in getting use out of NSO. So what can you use CLI for when you do kind of integrations and development? Because developing for NSO is not only about service development. You also tend to spend a lot of time doing integrations with other systems or integrating other systems with NSO. So one of the things that I struggle with, to be honest, is constructing paths. We have various ways of constructing paths. We support different kind of paths. They all need a namespace somewhere, might be prefix, maybe, something that knows the namespace, and they have different formats for keys. So that's something I struggle with. The most common example for using CLI is when you are going to provision something through a northbound system. You sort of create a dummy example in the CLI and you save that XML or JSON and use that as a basis for your payloads. This I won't go through because you see it in all our examples, in our example selection, and I'm focusing a bit more on the things that are less obvious. You can use the CLI to find the Yang source of your action, and you can use the CLI to profile and measure your NSO code, both detailed and kind of crude, which is sometimes very useful. And to me, the tools here has been very useful. I'm going to use a very small Yang model for these examples I have. And this is a tree format as Yang outputs it. If you're not accustomed to reading this, it's a module called devdays24, which has a list called devdays24 with a key that is name, it's a string. It has some config false or operational data called status, which is also a string. And there is some config data, which is an IPv4 address. And this I will use in the coming examples with some instance data. Because the CLI tools tend to work on instance data, not on schema. To make use of this, I populate it a bit with example data to work around it. So in this case, I have one list entry in devdays24 called DD1, and it has one IP address configured, and there is no operational data set. Right, so the topic of the session is CLI Dev Tools, and that actually means something in NSO. You need to enable that to get access to most of the things I will show here. If you use C-style, as you should, you do go into config mode and you do session devtools true. You don't need to commit anything, and this is valid for the session. If you use J-style, you do set devtools true. And this gives you access to some additional functionality, which is not enabled by default, or not visible by default. It's there, it's just hidden. So the most useful thing I found is the display target. You might be familiar that if you are a seasoned NSO user, you probably know that you can do pipe display XML or pipe display service metadata, or perhaps pipe display XPath, as Victor will maybe touch upon. But by enabling DevTools, you will get some more options there. So in order to make use of this, once you have your instance data there, you can use tab completion in the CLI to go down to the part you're interested in. You pipe your your pipe display, and then you can tab again to get a list of the options. So with DevTools enabled, it looks like this. You will see some new ones that was not there before. You can see Magic, you can see netconf, and you can see restconf. And this is what I'm going to show you a little bit on how to use. And surprisingly, a lot of time is spent on figure out the restconf paths, and this helps a lot with that. So how does that work? This is an example where I do show full configuration dev days 24 DD1, my list entry, pipe display restconf. I get both a path with the prefixes or the namespaces, whatever. I don't have to care because NSO tells me here, and also the data that is there. So this I can then use this path. Just as an example, you use it with curl as it is, of course, without the instance data. So here I just do a get to that base URL of NSO, and then I have pasted in /restconf data days 24, the whole thing that it gave me. And I get the output in JSON format here. And just to mention that, also something that is good to be explicit about, that you can easily control if NSO gives you JSON or XML by the content type. So I have specified application Yang data plus JSON here, and if I would have said JSON plus XML, I would instead have gotten XML. And the same goes when you post. So you can work through entirely in JSON if you prefer. Another one, if you are more focused on programming than integration, we have also a display target for Magic, and Magic with 2 A's is one of the Python APIs provided by NSO. So when you write your Python code, you have about the same problem. I need to set this data, I need to read this data, I need to construct a path. There's a list there somewhere, there's a namespace there somewhere. I need to remember where to put them. Or you don't, because you can do pipe display Magic. And here you see I get a Magic path that I can use in my Python code. It's at root.devdays24 __ devdays24 square bracket dd1 square bracket dot address, which is actually not that complicated, but when you sit and type, it can be tricky to remember how to construct it paths. Right, so I want to use this now, and perhaps I don't want to put this in my service code, craft a nice commit message, push it to some remote master and run it through my CI loop to just try my change. So I might want to try this locally on my machine where I have my instance data to see that I can use this in Python. And a bit of Python code to just read this is shown here on this road here, or row, not road, row here. This just starts a single Muppet read-write transaction. It gets a root object, and then I can use the path that I got from the pipe display Magic. In this case, I just print it, but then I do something else. You see below it, I set the config false leaf status as well, because remember our model that I showed in the beginning, everyone paid full attention and remembers by heart. There is like a operational data leaf here which is a string called status. And config false data you cannot set through CLI, you cannot set it through RESTconf or netconf, but you can set it through the programmatical interfaces. And you just basically use the same path. The reason I show it here is because since there was nothing there, I can't tab my way all the way down, so I just tab my way to the address field, which is right next to it, and then I replace the name. And this is, given the amount of familiar faces in the room, this might be familiar to you, but a good trick to know is that as long as I have sourced NCSRC, I can just execute this in my shell. I don't have to run it in the NSO package or anything. I can just put this in VI or Nano and run it as a Python script, so I can lab around with my Python code. So I put this in a file called devdays24.py, and then I just execute that with Python, devdays24.py. And I see here that it prints an IP address, which I expected to do. I showed earlier that that was what was provisioned. And below there, I used the same curl command with the same path, except that I've changed the address to status. They are on the same hierarchy. And I see that I have successfully set it as to up, as the Python code did. So when developing stuff for NSO, whether it being service code or small utilities or integration points, it's really nice to be able to just put it in a small Python script and try it out before going for the full thing. Now, when I talked about this talk with my colleagues over there, they mentioned we have a thing called describe in the CLI. It was news to me. I found it very nice. Whatever command you can run in CLI, you can use describe to find out more information about it. So why not do it on the describe command? So if you do describe, it tells you that it displays transparent command information, and here the interesting information is that the source is built in. This means it's a CLI-only functionality. If it's built in as source, you will not be able to call this directly through a northbound interface. So let's try it on something else. Let's try it on a high availability action. There's an action called local node ID, which gives you an identifier if configured properly for your high availability system. And here I get some more information. I can see that it is defined in a Yang module. I can see which namespace it is. I can see the path I need to call it. And with this information, I can find the Yang file that I need to call this. That is another thing that I encounter, that I'm used to doing something in the CLI, and then I'm going to automate it. And I'm like, where do I find the definition? How do I format my input to this thing that I do in the CLI? This can help you find a way there. And it can also help you find the Yang for the return values, if any. So this I found very useful. Second point here is action point NCS internal. It means the code for executing this action is within the platform and not sort of user code registered action point. This solves a bit of the makes a few things easier when integrating NSO with other systems. Yes. I have a very short section on rough profiling in CLI, and this might be one of the most common use cases for using NSO CLI when developing and trying out. And the most thing we talk the most about and show the most is commit pipe details verbose or something. It gives you kind of the progress trace in CLI. It's extremely useful. I'm not going to go into details about this. We have had sessions about it. It gives you tons of information, and it's really good for profiling, but it can be a bit too much to start with. You don't really know what all the stages mean and everything, so sometimes you want a cruder tool. And to me, one of the cruder tools can be something called time command, which is enabled when you enable dev tools. It simply tells you how long time it takes to execute a command in NSO CLI. So in the example here, I have done some time command commit no networking, and it finished in a few milliseconds. And this is kind of interesting because say that you create a new service and then you do a time command commit no networking. You get the rough idea on how much time is spent within NSO, within your service code and your service invocation directly without having to go through logs. And you can use this the same for other more direct action. You can use it for a device connect. Does it take time to connect to this device? I don't have to go to enable NAD traces and reconnect. I can do it straight from the CLI. And this is also something I recommend to start with if you are doing looking into why something takes time. You can break down your workflow into some steps, and you can use time command in the CLI to figure it out. Simple, crude, easy to understand, and easy to reason about. This actually concludes my content, and I hope I brought something new to you. And do we have questions in the audience?
Thank you. I have a question. From which version of NSO is this available?
Right, so some of it has been there forever. Time command is there. Commit details were verbose are there since at least 4 point something. And when it comes to this ones, the extra outputs, I think around 5.7. And then they have been continuing. So from 5.7 more or less, and then they have been developed since then. So probably you have a lot of this already.
So this display magic command, last time I checked, it was showing hyphens instead of underscore.
Yes, but it's no more. Now it's been fixed, and it will be released to fixes.
Good to hear.
Thanks. It's closed. You can thank How over there. He did the work. So it's coming. It's not. I don't think it's released yet, but it's coming. So.
Do we have more questions? All right. Thank you, Martin.
Thank you.